My husband was throwing out my grandmother's necklace, saying, "You're better off without old trash." I snatched it back and screamed. This was her last gift before she died. He scoffed. She was a manipulative witch. I held back tears. "Then why did you pawn the matching bracelet last year?" I asked. He froze. The room went silent. I didn't think much of it at first, just a rustle from the trash bin as I passed through the living room. I figured Owen had tossed out one of the old light bulbs he'd said he'd replace, but hadn't. That kind of thing had become normal in our house. Promises sitting around like broken furniture, collecting dust. But when I saw the glint of silver against the crumpled bills and coffee-stained napkins, something in me lurched. I bent over and pulled it out with slow fingers, like I was afraid of confirming the truth. The chain, slightly tangled and cold to the touch, slipped through my hand like a betrayal. I recognized the locket immediately. I didn't need to open it. I didn't need to see the faded picture of me and Grandma Sybil laughing in her garden to know exactly what it was. He had thrown away my grandmother's necklace. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at it, the way you stare at a door that's just been slammed in your face. Like you're not quite sure what to do next. Behind me, Owen was pouring himself another glass of orange juice, casual, humming to himself. Like he hadn't just crossed a line I didn't even know I had. I turned around, my hand clutching the necklace tight. I didn't say anything right away. I think I wanted him to notice on his own. I wanted him to see what he'd done and realize it was wrong. That's how deep the denial had sunk in me. That's how much I still wanted to believe he was a man who simply made mistakes. When he glanced over and saw what was in my hand, he didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He just rolled his eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're better off without that old trash," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The words hit me like a slap, even though his tone was relaxed. Dismissive. I stared at him. This was her last gift before she died. There was a silence after that just for a moment. And then he scoffed. She was a manipulative witch. Always putting ideas in your head. And just like that, something inside me broke open. Not shattered all at once. No, it was slower than that. Like a window cracking under pressure. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stared at him, and the truth I'd been ignoring for months, maybe years, started lining up behind my eyes like ghosts. I looked at the necklace in my hand, and then I looked at him. Calm. Too calm. "Then why?" I said slowly, my voice lower than I expected it to be. "Did you pawn the matching bracelet last year?" It was like I'd flipped a switch in the room. The energy shifted. He froze. Not a blink. Not a word. Just stillness. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. The kind that builds like thunder in the distance. He didn't deny it. He didn't confess either. He just stood there, caught somewhere between shock and calculation, like he was trying to decide whether to lie or explain. But that silence, it told me everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in our bed, our shared bed, with a man I suddenly felt miles away from. I kept replaying it in my head. The way he tossed the necklace, the way he looked at me like I was the problem, like I was broken for caring. And that pause. That damn pause. It had been bothering me for a long time, that bracelet. I remembered the day I lost it. I had looked everywhere, under the bed, in coat pockets, even down the sink. I'd cried. I thought maybe I'd been careless. That maybe I didn't deserve it in the first place. But it wasn't lost. It had been taken. By the person I trusted most. I waited until he was asleep before slipping out of bed. I pulled out our shared laptop and opened the browser. Owen thought I didn't know how to clear search histories. That was his mistake. He never bothered hiding much because he didn't think I'd look. But I did. And I found it, an online receipt from Tri-County Gold and Pawn. A transaction in his full name. $650 for a vintage garnet bracelet. Sold nearly a year ago. I sat there in the dark, my heart beating slow and loud. I couldn't feel my hands. He'd sold it behind my back. And worse, he'd lied to my face about it. Made me feel like I was crazy for missing something so important. That betrayal sat in my chest like a weight. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't fix his lunch like I usually did. I just sat at the kitchen table with the necklace in front of me, waiting for him to come downstairs. When he did, he stopped in his tracks. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. I just looked at him. "You stole from me." He rubbed his eyes, played the victim. "You're really going to throw everything away over a stupid bracelet?" "It wasn't just a bracelet," I said. "It was a part of my grandmother. The only family I had who never left." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. "You knew what it meant to me. And you took it anyway." "I was doing it for us," he said finally. "We needed the money." "For what?" He didn't answer. Because there was no answer that would justify it. I stood up. My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. I want you out. I didn't cry until I was alone. After he left, slamming the door behind him, muttering something about me being ungrateful, I sat on the floor and cried until my stomach hurt. That was the beginning of the end. The unraveling didn't happen overnight, but once a lie is exposed, the others come tumbling after like dominoes. I learned about the hidden credit cards, about the time he borrowed money from our joint savings to gamble with friends, the small betrayals that didn't seem so bad at the time because they were wrapped in half-truths and justifications. I found out he'd intercepted mail from my grandmother's estate, that she had left me her old cottage in Black Mountain, and he had hidden the letter, probably hoping I'd never know. But I did. And once I knew, there was no going back. The cottage in Black Mountain had been empty for a little over 2 years, ever since Grandma Sybil passed. I hadn't stepped foot in it since the funeral. It always felt too full of her. The air inside clung to her scent, lavender, beeswax, and a faint trace of mothballs, and I wasn't ready to face the space without her voice humming somewhere in the background. But now, the house represented something different. It wasn't just memory anymore, it was freedom. It was mine. When I opened the front door that late autumn afternoon, a cold, dry draft swept past me like a whisper of welcome or warning, I wasn't sure which. The air was stale. Dust clung to the light coming through the windows. But underneath that, I felt something else. A quiet stillness. A kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I dropped my overnight bag on the floor, walked into the living room, and sat in her old armchair. The floral fabric was faded and sun-bleached, but the frame was still strong. I ran my hands over the wooden armrests, remembering how she'd sit in that exact spot with her tea and knitting needles, pausing to look up at the birds outside like they were part of the conversation. The silence here was different than at home with Owen. This wasn't cold or loaded with tension, it was restful. Safe. I stayed for 3 days. No one called. Owen didn't text. The house phone rang once, and I let it go to voicemail. I needed time to think, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself the space to do it. I started opening drawers, closets, cabinets, places I hadn't gone through since the funeral. Most of it was what you'd expect, old cookbooks, half-used candles, dusty linens, but then I found something I wasn't expecting. It was tucked inside the armoire in the bedroom, beneath a pile of quilted throws. A metal lockbox, the kind with a tiny brass key, which I found rubber-banded to the handle of a mason jar of buttons. I don't know what I thought would be inside. Part of me hoped it was a letter from her, some posthumous wisdom meant just for me. Some part of her reaching out from beyond, telling me I wasn't crazy for walking away. What I found was paperwork. Folders labeled in my grandmother's neat cursive. One for the deed to the cottage. Another full of bank statements. And another, thinner, more weathered, marked Monica. Inside was a letter. And 2 photographs. The first photo was of me, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting on the porch with a popsicle and no front teeth, smiling so big it made my cheeks hurt just to look at it. The second was older. Black and white. A woman I recognized as Grandma Sybil in her 20s, sitting next to a man I'd never seen before. The letter was dated 4 months before she died. It started plainly. If you're reading this, Monica, I suppose you've come back here for more than the dust. Her tone was familiar. Wry. Sharp-edged but warm. She went on to talk about how she knew Owen wasn't good for me. That she had kept quiet, not because she approved, but because she didn't think I was ready to hear it. You loved him, she wrote. And I knew if I told you he was poison, you'd only drink deeper to prove me wrong. That line stuck with me. She told me about a trust account she'd set up in my name. One Owen didn't know about. I couldn't stop you from making mistakes, she wrote. But I could make sure you had a way out when you were ready. There was a copy of the trust statement in the folder. $25,000. Not a fortune, but enough. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the letter until my eyes burned. I had spent so long doubting myself, believing I was the one who needed fixing, the one who needed to try harder, be more understanding, be quieter, be less sensitive. But all along, she'd seen it. She'd seen him. She just waited for me to see it too. I drove back to the house I'd shared with Owen after those 3 days. Not because I wanted to patch things up, there was nothing left to fix, but because I needed to face it one last time. To gather my things. To reclaim the pieces of myself that still lived in that house, hidden in drawers and closets like ghosts. When I walked through the door, I didn't feel like I was walking into my home anymore. It felt like entering a stranger's house. Familiar walls, unfamiliar air. Owen was sitting on the couch with his feet up, scrolling on his phone like nothing had changed. When he looked up and saw me standing there, his face flickered with something, maybe relief, maybe dread. He stood. You're back. I'm here for my things. His smile faded. You're not thinking clearly, Monica. You're upset. You're letting your emotions take over. I stayed still. You lied to me. For years. He ran his hands through his hair. People lie sometimes. That's marriage. You think I never had to forgive you? For what? I asked, genuinely curious. He didn't answer. I walked past him. Into the bedroom. I started pulling clothes from the closet. Books from the nightstand. Jewelry from the little box on the dresser, though there wasn't much left. I noticed a few pieces missing. I didn't even bother asking. He followed me, hands on his hips, hovering like a shadow. I made mistakes, he said. But we built a life together. You can't just throw it away. It was already gone, I said, turning to face him. You threw it away piece by piece. I just didn't notice until now. He sighed. This is over a necklace? It's about everything. But that necklace, that was the last straw. I saw something shift in him then. The performance cracked. The pleading expression dropped. His mouth curled slightly. She was never as innocent as you thought, you know. Your grandmother. She turned you into this. I held his gaze. She saved me from becoming what you wanted me to be. I left that house with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag full of old photo albums. That's all I took. Everything else, he could have it. Back at the cottage, I sat on the porch and listened to the wind move through the trees. The leaves were starting to fall, blanketing the yard in gold and rust. I wrapped myself in one of Grandma's quilts and watched the sky turn pink behind the mountains. It was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like a beginning. The days after leaving Owen blurred together in a kind of numb quiet. I'd wake up early, the light pouring in through the sheer curtains Grandma had sewn herself, and for a second, just a split second, I'd forget everything. Forget the lies. The gaslighting. The pawning. I'd lie there in bed thinking maybe I'd get up, make coffee for 2, maybe head to the store and pick up the kind of cereal he liked. But then I'd remember. And it was like the weight of it all came rushing back, settling in my chest like wet concrete. I tried to distract myself with the house. Cleaning. Rearranging furniture. I found a hidden trapdoor in the pantry one afternoon, leading to a crawl space full of dusty jars and a box of my old school projects. My 3rd grade diorama of the solar system was still intact, though Pluto had fallen off. Funny, the things we used to count on. It was mid-November when I got a phone call from a name I hadn't seen in years. Josie. We hadn't spoken since my wedding. She was my cousin on my father's side. We used to be thick as thieves, running around Grandma Sybil's garden catching fireflies, making daisy crowns, whispering secrets. But life happens. I moved. She got married. I got married. We lost touch. Hey, her voice said, uncertain, when I picked up. I heard what happened. Owen, the necklace. I blinked. How did you? She sighed. My mom. Your Aunt Marla. She talks to your neighbor. The one who walks her dog at weird hours. Anyway. I'm sorry. I wanted to reach out sooner. It took me a second to respond. Her voice pulled me back to a different time. A safer one. Thanks, I said. I'm okay. Just trying to figure it all out. There was a pause. Do you want to get lunch? Or coffee? I'm in Asheville for the week. I hesitated. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't ready to put on a face, pretend I was fine. But then again, maybe that's what I needed, a reminder that there were still people out there who remembered who I used to be. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. We met at a small cafe near Pack Square, the kind with hand-lettered chalkboard menus and mismatched mugs. Josie looked older, of course, her hair shorter, streaked with gray, but the eyes were the same. Kind. Observant. Like she was always seeing more than you realized. We talked for over 2 hours. About Grandma Sybil. About old times. About the funeral I barely remembered attending. And then, just as I was about to reach for the check, she said something that made my hand freeze. You know, she said, Aunt Sybil tried to tell me. About him. Years ago. I looked up. What do you mean? She pulled me aside at your wedding. Said she didn't trust him. Said he had that glint in his eye, whatever that meant. She told me if you ever needed help getting away, I should drop everything and come. I stared at her. She never said that to me. Josie gave a small, sad smile. She knew you wouldn't listen. You were so in love. I laughed, but it was bitter. I thought I was. I thought he was the one person who saw me. Maybe he saw you, she said quietly. But not the parts worth loving. That line stayed with me all the way home. Back at the cottage, I dug out the box again. The one from the armoire. I flipped through the documents, trying to see if I'd missed anything. Some line or note that might make more sense now. And I found it. Tucked inside the flap of the folder labeled Monica, behind the letter and the photos, was a small envelope. Inside was a key and a post-it note. Storage Unit 42B, Westridge Storage. Ask for Jerome. I stared at it for a long time. Another secret. Another breadcrumb. Another piece of her I hadn't known she left behind. The next morning, I drove to Westridge. It was one of those low-slung buildings near the industrial park, with faded blue doors and a smell of metal and mildew. I asked for Jerome at the front desk. An older man with a shaved head and thick glasses came out from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. "You must be Sybil's girl," he said. "She told me you'd come someday." "She told you?" He nodded. "She set it up years ago. Paid for 10 years in advance. Said it was private. Told me to let you in when you showed up with the key." He led me down a corridor lined with unit doors, each one a slice of someone's past. Unit 42B was in the back. The key turned smoothly. The door creaked open. Inside, dust hung in the air like memory. There were 3 large plastic bins, a garment bag, and a wooden trunk. I opened the trunk first. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. Some sealed. Some not. All in her handwriting. There were photos. Newspaper clippings. A recipe book I thought we'd lost. And at the very bottom, wrapped in silk, was the matching bracelet. My breath caught. She'd never given it to me. She must have kept it after all, not because she didn't trust me with it, but because she didn't trust him. I sat on the floor of that cold storage unit and cried into my hands. It wasn't about the jewelry. It was about being believed. About being loved by someone who saw everything and still wanted the best for you. That bracelet wasn't just a thing, it was proof. That she knew. That she had always known. And that she'd done everything she could to protect me, even if it meant hiding the truth for a while. I stayed at the storage unit for nearly 2 hours. I read the first letter, then the second. Each one was a breadcrumb, a memory, a hug from the past, and they began to shape something in me I hadn't felt in a long time. Direction. Not revenge. Not bitterness. But purpose. Because there was still more I didn't understand about Owen. About what he might have taken. About what my grandmother had tried to shield me from. And I wasn't done digging. I took the bracelet home that evening and placed it gently next to the necklace on my grandmother's old vanity. For a long time, I just stood there, watching the 2 pieces finally reunited. It felt like the end of a puzzle coming together, like something had clicked into place that had been off for years. I read through more of her letters that night. Each one carefully written, some no more than a few lines, others spanning full pages. They were filled with stories I'd forgotten and things I'd never known, memories she wanted me to have when I was ready. And between those memories were little truths, quiet but pointed. Mentions of Owen. Of the way he looked at money. Of the questions he used to ask her when he thought I wasn't around. She'd suspected he was using me as a stepping stone from the very beginning. One of the letters mentioned a lawyer. "In case he tries anything after I'm gone," she wrote, "talk to Helen Cardwell. She knows everything." The next day I called. Helen was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and efficient, with a voice like sandpaper and silk. She remembered Grandma immediately. She told me about Owen, she said, without needing any prompting. Told me she didn't trust him. That he had a gambler's smile and a coward's morals. Helen had handled all of Grandma's affairs after her death. And it turned out there was more to them than I'd realized. "She left you more than just the cottage," Helen said. "She left you her savings account. But it was contingent." "Contingent on what?" Helen paused. "On you leaving him." I sat there in stunned silence. She told me, "Monica won't need it until she's ready to walk away. But when she does, I want to make sure she doesn't have to look back." It took a moment for that to sink in. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Enough," Helen said. "Enough for you to start something new, if that's what you want." The money wasn't millions, but it was enough to make a move. Enough to breathe. That night, I sat down and began planning. I didn't want revenge the way you see it in movies. I didn't want to scream or break his things. I didn't want to fight. I wanted something quieter, smarter. I wanted him to feel the slow weight of his own choices and know exactly where they had landed him. I started by visiting our old financial advisor, someone Owen had refused to speak with for years after a minor disagreement. I learned quickly that there were accounts I never knew existed. Joint ones. Ones he'd funneled small amounts into from our shared checking for years, always careful not to trigger alarms. He'd used my name on the paperwork but never given me access. Helen helped me file paperwork to freeze those accounts and reclaim my share. Then I filed the divorce papers. No drama. No warning. Just a knock at his door one Monday morning with an envelope in hand from my attorney. He called me, of course. 10 times that first day. Then 20. Then came the texts. This is a mistake. We can fix this. You're overreacting. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'd spent years responding, explaining, trying to fix things that were never mine to fix. A week later, he showed up at the cottage. I saw him pull into the driveway from the window. He got out slowly, like he wasn't sure whether to be angry or apologetic. I stepped out onto the porch before he could knock. You need to leave, I said simply. Monica, come on. Don't do this. You're not thinking clearly. I looked at him, really looked. The man who had once made me believe I was too much and not enough, all at the same time. He looked tired. Smaller, somehow. I've never been clearer, I said. He shifted his weight. You think you're better than me now? Because of some money your grandma left you? No, I said. Because I know who I am now. And I know what you did. His jaw tightened. You stole from me, I said. You manipulated me. Lied to me. Made me feel like I was broken for caring about the things that mattered. You're still angry over a bracelet, he muttered. I nodded once. No. I'm done being angry. But you're going to remember that bracelet for the rest of your life. He stared at me for a long moment, and then, seeing that he wasn't going to get what he wanted, he turned and walked back to his car. He didn't say goodbye. 3 months passed. The divorce was finalized. I kept the cottage, the savings, and my name. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't want it. I just wanted him gone. I used part of the inheritance to open a small studio downtown. A space for writing, workshops, maybe art classes in the future. I called it Sybil House. It wasn't fancy. Just one room, big windows, wood floors, and the old rocking chair from Grandma's porch in the corner. But people came. Mostly women. Some older. Some younger. All of them looking for something. Peace. Clarity. A place to tell the truth without having to apologize for it. One afternoon, I saw Josie walk in. She looked around, smiled, and said, she'd be proud of you. I didn't answer. I just squeezed her hand. The last time I saw Owen was almost a year later at the grocery store. He was in the self-checkout line, buying microwave dinners and a 6-pack. He looked thinner. His hair had gone a bit gray around the edges. He saw me, gave a nod. Nothing more. And that was enough. I walked past him without stopping, feeling the warm weight of the bracelet around my wrist and the necklace against my collarbone. Some things you carry, but some things some people you leave behind.